Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Not Content Podcast. On this podcast, we pour from the seemingly endless queue of movies, television shows, and maybe even other surprises along the way as part of our podcast channel From the Queue. Please subscribe, like, and review From the Queue on YouTube or your favorite podcasting platform, especially Spotify and Apple, as you can get those algorithms going with positive feedback. You can find us on Blue Sky at From the Queue. You can find us through Instagram at From the Queue as well as Threads. If you're listening to us on YouTube, all of our links will be in the description below. My name is Jerome Cuson. You can find me on Instagram at Jerome Cuson. You can find me on Blue Sky at Jerome C1985. My co-host is Brian. You can find him on Twitter for now at Brian DeBrain.
It's the top of the sixth inning, and after being 6 movies deep into the project, this might be the most disappointing inning to date. Well, at least for Brian. It's the summer of 1993, and 20th Century Fox already released The Sandlot 3 months earlier in the year. Now, I know what you're thinking. 2 family baseball movies released in the same year? Crazy, right?
Pedro Guerrero, Bobby Bonilla, Barry Bonds. Only one pitcher can stop hitters like these.
I'm the new pitcher.
And this summer, he'll teach them
I dare you to run. What?
a whole new way to play the game.
Chicken?
I'm not a chicken, you're the chicken.
Rookie of the Year.
Gotcha.
Now, Jerome, I think you were obviously a little more lenient towards this movie. You're more nostalgic for it. You've seen it more times than I have, probably. This is like my 3rd viewing of the movie, and quite frankly, I just misremembered a lot of this movie. Growing up, I used to think this movie ended in a dream. Like, this was like a whole dream for this kid, Henry Rowengartner. But it turns out the whole movie was real, and he did have a bad arm that gave him a good arm, and then he had a bad arm again. So this movie is all over the place. I don't like the script, but I know you're very nostalgic for it. It's got, the Chicago Cubs feel and the Chicago.
Although I'm not a Cubs fan, let's
I know you're not a Cubs
happen.
fan, but there's the Chicago feel, and I understand that. So it's kind of a mixed bag, but right off the bat, I just want to say that I think the first act of this movie is just so poorly written that it just took me aback, and I was thinking like, wow, no wonder I have like no like positive memories of this movie other than Daniel Stern getting trapped in like these in these weird little cages and like in between
Daniel
the
Stern's
floors of the
physical
hotel.
comedy is a fun sidetrack. It doesn't really jive with the rest of the movie because it feels like everybody else is playing this straight, and Daniel Stern is just not in the same movie as everybody else, which is
And
weird
he's the
because he's the
director.
director.
I know, it's so weird.
It's weird that he would direct himself in a different movie than everybody else.
But I don't know. Maybe that's just his way of doing things, because I don't know. I mean, he's a veteran of the Wonder Years, a lot of voice acting on that one, veteran of the Home Alone films, which kind of inspired him to do this movie. So, I mean, he's learned from a lot of people. So I don't know why he went on this thing about going in like 2 different directions of the movie. But maybe it's a script problem, because this script, like I mentioned, is not that great. It's written by Sam Harper, and he doesn't really have a great resume, so to speak. He also wrote Cheaper by the Dozen too, Just Married, Rio. Not a lot of like great movies, right? So I guess this is kind of like claim to fame other than the Cheaper by the Dozen movies, because they play those a lot on FX. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I'm at on this movie. Like, it's got a great cast. The performances are fun. Thomas Ian Nicholas is, he gets annoying sometimes, but that's fine because he's a kid actor, but he kind of gets over that, I think, by the middle of the movie.
I think he's the best part of this movie. I think he nails this performance flat out, full stop.
It took a while because his voice is not the same voice you hear. Obviously, he's doing, puberty. Right?
He's going through puberty, but I actually think him straddling between being an adult and child is actually what this movie needs.
That does make sense. I give you that, and because I'm so used to the American
haircut. Like, the haircut makes him look older, but he still has like the teeth of a kid. So I think that the casting of Thomas Ian Nicholas is brilliant. because he simultaneously looks like he could be a young adult, but he's also very much a child.
For sure. And let's just get the basic plot out of the way. This kid, Thomasine Nicholas, has an accident at school, messes up his shoulder. I guess he breaks his arm and then separates his shoulder as well. So once it heals up, the tendons and ligaments didn't quite heal correctly, and it allowed his arm to have this great, amazing, like, resistance to the point where if he goes so back with his arm, he can throw 100 miles an hour. So it's just so ridiculous. I mean, nothing in the history of medical science has that happened, but it's it's not a Disney movie, obviously. It's 20th Century Fox, but still, it's one of those premises that it's just like, wow, I guess this is where we're going with this. Like, he could have just been a really talented kid, but they just went with this kind of idea, and that's kind of like the joke throughout the movie. And I kind of noticed because, like, I've been watching a lot of chiropractor videos in the last couple of years, and basically, if you watch what happened at the end of the movie when he falls down again and hits his shoulder, he basically just readjusts himself back to being normal and what his shoulder rotation should be. So in essence, he just needed to go to a chiropractor to fix it, but he didn't. And then he ended up the whole summer, he just ends up with this arm that's just like devastating. He's averaging 100 miles an hour on every pitch. So obviously, like, the Cubs recruit him. Then we don't have no mention of pay up until like the Yankees contract, but according to what you looked up, and I looked it up as well, he would have made 100.
He would have gotten $109,000 for the rest of the year.
Yeah, and then in today's money, it's like 193,000 something. So, yeah, and then I guess he's not getting the money from his manager, which they don't bring up, which is kind of they left that kind of finished and unsettled. I wanted more from that guy, just instead of just getting punched in the face. The boyfriend.
You wanted justice for Henry. You wanted a lawyer. You wanted to take him to court for being a bad parent.
Well, not her. It's him. It's the bad boyfriend. It's like he did all these deals, and we don't even see like them getting the money. We never see that. So it was just kind of like, what's going on here? Like, obviously she's not keeping the money, and he's keeping the money. So that's what Crown was like. I was kind of like, what's going on here? Like, are we gonna finish this plot line up? And he just disappears.
The sequel is actually just an episode of Law and Order where the mom has a lawyer sue him. Like,
yeah, and then the whole Yankee contract thing, I don't even know if that's legal because she just signed it, but under false pretenses. So there's a real contract gray area.
I have a feeling there's like cut. Either they shot some things and they cut it, or there was parts in the script. I have actually read the novelization. I don't remember how they handled it. The novelization is weird because Henry Gardner, like, they show him pitching more and they describe him pitching more and hitting more, and like he doesn't always strike out. It's really weird. I think this is a very charming movie. I don't think the script is good. I want to be absolutely clear, but I think everything else is actually good. I think the score. This is like Bill Conti's like side B, but I mean it's really good. Like, if the opening of this movie doesn't get you fired up for baseball, then you have no soul whatsoever.
I think he does the best at the end for the game. Like, I think the music from Bill Conti.
I think the beginning and the end of this. I mean, I think the score is pretty solid, but the beginning and the ending, I think he absolutely nails it.
It has the Rocky vibes, which I was kind of expecting once I saw Bill Conti on the screen. I was like, okay.
That I appreciate is that it doesn't sound like the Rocky theme. It uses different instruments.
The instrument, that feeling, that feeling of like overcoming kind of thing, and that's kind of what his sports are about.
So I think you want the same feel, but you want it to sound. You don't want it to sound like Rocky because Rocky is in a completely different circumstance. Like baseball and boxing, in terms of rhythm, are also very different sports. So I think that it's good that they sound different, but that they have the same feel. Like, I think that's a really hard thing to do, and I think Bill Conti did a really good job here. I mean, the fact that he also does Karate Kid, I mean, that's another really, really good score as well. And I mean, he's probably pretty underrated, but in terms of sports scores, I mean, he does a really good job. And I think the editing.
He might be the saving grace on Rocky V.
He might be. The editing of this movie is also really good. And so there are two editors, one of whom is Don Camburn, who just left us at the age of 93. And he's got quite a record. He did the editing for, if you could believe it, Easy Rider. He was also the editor on The Last Picture Show, and he is also the editor. Brian, I know you'll be proud of this. Major League 2 and Little Giants.
Yeah, I think we mentioned his name when we reviewed Little Giants, and then I actually mentioned that we're going to talk about Rookie of the Year in Major League 2. So the guy knows how to shoot sports. Let's just say that, because Little Giants we talked about was good. And
I love the scene where Henry gets on base and the back and forth between the mom and Chet. I think that's really good stuff.
It's very well shot, and I love the lighting in the stadium because it actually, you can see the uniforms pop. Because let's face it, the Cubs uniforms is one of the best ever, I think, in baseball, and that's coming from a Dodger fan. Because that blue on the stripe, it just pops so well in with the red. It's iconic to me. So whenever I see them film the stuff in the stadium, it just looks so good, and I love it every time. But again, with the logic of this, I don't know if the writer knew the rules of baseball quite well, because wasn't that a balk? Wasn't he balking the whole time for those 2 outs? Come on.
I think that you could argue he was certainly balking. I mean, his delivery was also not very good. Like, they actually hit it pretty well. I don't think you ever really saw him in one motion pitch. And I think the same is true. Also, Gary Busey's delivery was not as good, but I think they actually compensated for it pretty well. Like, it feels like I always go back to Bull Durham. It feels like they let Tim Robbins out to dry. In this movie, it feels like they covered for the fact that Thomas Ian Nicholas and Gary Busey couldn't necessarily execute the pitching very well.
And it did look like 100 miles an hour. I don't know if they just I guess they just sped up the frame when the delivery's in the middle, and then they just speed it up. So that was really cool. I don't know if you want to just do the Roger Ebert quote now, since we've been doing Roger Ebert quotes. He's more favorable of this than I am, so this is quite the. This is probably the perfect
in line
quote
with
for you.
me. I think so Roger Ebert writes about his experience as a little leaguer and how terrible he was, and this movie clearly made him feel very nostalgic. When I was a kid, I think I might have liked Rookie of the Year a lot. I'm no longer a kid, and this movie is not likely to make my list of the year's best, but I can remember those miserable Little League games, and so in a modest way, I'm grateful for this film. It is pure wish fulfillment 40 years after I needed it. And I think that's why this movie definitely connected with kids. I definitely remember seeing this like in 1993 in Chicago at like a movie palace, the patio, and it was full, man. Like, this movie definitely, like, it's definitely not a huge moneymaker, but obviously in Chicago, like, this was definitely a big deal. And this is a movie that I have a lot of nostalgic fondness for. This is one I've seen a lot. It's been a while since I've watched it. And again, I want to emphasize that this script is not good, but I really like the performances. We've highlighted Gary Busey and Tommy C. and Nicholas, but Albert Hall as the manager, like, this is one of his more memorable roles. I think he really does a great job. Amy Morton as Mary Rowan Gardner. I mean, she does a spectacular job, just playing a single mom, being protective of her kid. Like, she is really good. She's really underrated, and it's a shame. It's a shame she hasn't been in a lot of other things as well. You've got the great Dan Hedaya as kind of the shifty, soon-to-be potential owner. Big fan of his, and he is his usual shady self. And what a great payoff to that character, having him sell hot dogs. That definitely tickled me.
So I gotta ask: in '93, we know the Cubs were not like on the verge of collapsing in terms of a franchise. But I tried to find it. Was there a rule that you can like just eliminate a whole franchise based on their attendance? Like they kind of loosely based that on Major League.
I mean, they would have moved. I mean, the Cubs were never in danger of that. I mean, the Cubs have always, with the exception, I mean, it's been a long time since I would say they were in danger of moving, but the Cubs have always been the more popular team because Wrigley Field in itself is a tourist destination. And yeah, I mean, the Cubs have been bad, but they've never, I don't think, been in danger of just going away. So it's it's kind of a weird premise. I mean, I kind of get what they're going for. They want the Wrigley Field. They want the Wrigley Field of it all. They want the Chicago Cubs of it all because of what they did with Cleveland. But I don't know that it necessarily works because, again, the Cubs have never really been in danger of going away. So, I mean, the premise of the movie is very flawed.
Yeah, and that kind of goes to what John Candy was saying in his dialogue, and I guess like he doesn't get a credit in the movie because he was casted after, and they kind of filmed it like after the main initial filming.
Which is it's very obvious that that's what they did.
Yeah, and he wasn't interacting in any other scenes. It's just him in the booth. But he mentions that like if the Cubs win the division, that they go to the World Series, and I'm just like, I had to rewind it
Yeah,
just to make sure he says it, and he says it, which is completely inaccurate. And this is even before the wild card. So at this time, whoever were the top division winners would face off in the championship series. So they would still have to go to the NLCS, which makes me think Major League 2 goes and shows you the ALCS. They don't show the ALCS in the first one. They showed in the second one. So I was thinking, like, why not show the full series like we saw in other movies? You know what I'm saying? Instead, they just focus on the one game to make it seem like do or die.
Yeah, it's really weird.
But, you know, it's not.
I think they're really trying to keep the movie to 1 hour and 40 minutes, I would say. I mean, this movie definitely gets in and out, which I think is a good thing. This is not a movie that should be 2 hours or even 2 hours and 5 minutes. I don't know. It's definitely a very.
And I know it's just, I don't know if John
movie.
Candy's just a Canadian who doesn't know baseball too well, which would make some sense. But, you know, the Expos were kind of still popular around this time, right? And I think they had a World Series appearance the year before.
I mean, the other thing is that, you know, he is Canadian, but I mean, he's been in a lot of like Chicago adjacent movies, so you would think he would know something about baseball. I mean, he was hanging around Bill Murray for at least some of the time, and Bill Murray's one of the biggest Cubs fans you could ever find. The tragedy of John Candy is that he would have been a perfect John Madden, and sadly, we will not get to.
I know, absolutely. I totally see it. He doesn't need a fat suit. He doesn't need to lose weight for the role. Obviously, he would have been so perfect.
I mean, Nicolas Cage is
over the top.
I like Nicolas Cage a lot, but he is a terrible choice for John Madden.
I'm guessing he sold his audition based on a voice, like the voice of John Madden, not actually.
I don't know. I mean, David O. Russell's also not the person who should be directing it. It's just,
to me, a Madden movie should be fun, not introspective.
It should be fun. Yeah, no, a John Madden movie should be absolute chaotic fun. It should not be serious. That would defeat the purpose.
That would be too much.
Absolutely.
But, director, I wanted to mention really quick that he was inspired to direct this movie because he was working with Macaulay Culkin on Home Alone 1 and 2, and he saw how poorly his parents were like treating him. And there he goes on record saying that like Macaulay Culkin didn't really know anything about like having fun or being a kid or playing ball or anything. And he just felt so sorry for him. So I gotta imagine like Daniel Stern and Macaulay Culkin have this weird relationship where I gotta imagine he treats him more like a son because that's the kind of love that Macaulay Culkin needed at the time, instead of these parents that were just taking his money, you know, and he's been on record about that. And they show some of those elements too, obviously, with the boyfriend manipulating the kid and selling a talent to New York for $25 million, which I don't even think is a real thing. I don't even think that's legal in the MLB at the time to just sell a player for $25 million.
You cannot sell players anymore. I mean, like Babe Ruth was sold to the Yankees, but you can't.
That was 100 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't be able to do that. But yeah, again, there's some definite flaws to this movie. I don't know. There's a little bit of weirdness with the kids and the way they talk about the young ladies. Also not very cool, I will say. But I want to point out that Becky Fraker, the actor, do you remember what other sports movie she's in?
I can't remember, but she's got one of those familiar faces that was driving me nuts.
She is the goalie in D2, the Mighty Ducks.
There it is. And she hardly had any lines in this, too. And it was just so unfortunate because she was smiling and it looked like she was about to say something nice, but then they just cut her dialogue. So, yeah, that was that cafeteria scene.
Yeah, this is a movie that basically has like two female speaking roles, and one of them barely gets an arc to speak of. So, yeah. I really want to know how much Bobby Bonilla got paid for this, because, I mean, we know that Bobby Bonilla is a very slick man when it comes to finances, and he is currently, Bobby Bonilla Day is July 1st, and basically he gets like $1.2 million or something from the New York Mets, and will continue to do so until the year 2039. He's also collecting six figures from the Baltimore Orioles for a number of years. So I want to know how much Bobby Bonilla got paid for this. That's what I want to know.
Well, he didn't have a speaking role, so he might not be union. So he might have got screwed over. Although Barry Bonds did have a look, but he didn't say a line either. So I don't know. There's very like.
I want to know how much Barry Bonds got paid too. Barry Bonds. I mean, like to me, he would be the type to be like, "That's not going to work for me." Like that's how it would come across to me.
Yeah, and especially like a kid outdoing him like 100 miles an hour. Like it just seemed like, wow, that was a little on Barry Bonds like to do this cameo, but it made it work, and it made the league, you know, it made it seem like, okay, this is the whole MLB, not just the Cubs. So that was good. Even with like one or two cameos like that, it kind of expands like your, uh, what you're seeing. It's not just the Cubs, and it's not just focused on the Cubs. And he's like going to other towns and stuff like that. I wish we saw more of that, or him traveling. But at the same time, so he starts out on August 11th, which is my birthday, meaning he's got 2 months on the season, and yet they're just going to allow him to like miss all of September of school. Just that's where I'm like, okay, maybe this works if he got hurt in June and went on during the summer when he had no school, and then gets pulled out or something like that. But I just feel like they just like, fuck school. September, we need you for the Cubs. We need you throwing 100 miles an hour, getting all these saves. But that's what it was. So, yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Certainly we could have gone over those logistics if this became a Disney Plus series. We'd probably get some of that. But yeah, so do you want my story about this movie and my connection to one of the actors?
For sure, and then we'll talk about how how he came into the 2015 NLCS and then the World Series.
So number 18 of the New York Mets. I'm not going to use his real name. I'm just going to say his name. His name is BJ. So I am not a softball player. I'm a terrible athlete, but I would help to manage and facilitate a team, and we would always at one of the park leagues in Chicago play BJ and his team. And I'm just going to tell you, Brian, BJ is one of the biggest assholes that I have ever met on the planet Earth, to the point. And Brian, I want you know me better. You know me better than a lot of people. There was a point when I wanted to fight BJ. That's how much he pissed me off. He's just one of the most annoying human beings. He is more annoying than Henry Rowan Gardner is in this movie in terms of the way he talks and whines and complains and bitches to the umpires. Can't stand him. Absolutely do not like this man. And I was like, why does nobody like shout Rookie of the Year stuff at him? And I don't know, man. I don't like him on a personal level. He's an asshole.
Well, there you go. That's the inside scoop from Jerome on that one. And I've seen Jerome like get pissed off at people in the front row at PWG. So I've seen it. I've seen the vinegar and the visceral and all that stuff. And yeah, I remember that 2015 Bola where he almost got into it with that guy in the front row who wouldn't sit the fuck down. I remember that clearly. So I know the wrath.
And just the worst. Just the absolute worst.
For sure. So I mentioned the 2015 NLCS. So, Nicholas, Thomasine Nicholas, he's been a regular at Cubs Stadium, seventh inning stretch, that kind of thing. But when the Cubs got really hot in 2015 and 2016, things were getting serious. He was there for the Mets game. Again, the Mets, which is kind of perfect for 2015. But the Mets ended up winning that year and going to the World Series. The next year is the big best of 7 against the Indians for the World Series, one of the most memorable World Series in the most recent memory for me, even more so than the Dodger one where they lost the Game 7, because at the time the Indians and the Cubs were like the two cursed teams left in MLB. So it was like one curse is going to end and one is going to continue, and you were kind of like split. I was going more for the Cubs because of the connection to Back to the Future too. So it was really cool to see him come out, and then Daniel Stern reprising the Brickma role for like a lot of YouTube skits and stuff like that. You can kind of look it up and see him doing the character today, and it still works. And it's like, I guess that character is memorable because that's like the only memorable funny thing I remember from this movie is him in the hotel room getting trapped between the two doors, which I tried that as a kid and I couldn't fit. So I was like, how did they pull it off?
Yeah, the cast montage is pretty good. I definitely chortled a couple times.
Yeah, and then him getting trapped in the cage was ridiculous. So there's just all these different things, but it's memorable, and he's very memorable in this role. So that was really cool to see him reprise that. Overall, I think, look, it's well shot, fun performances, memorable bits and scenes and stuff like that. But man, that first act was really like a struggle because all the logic kept flying into my head. I'm thinking like, okay, just throw that out because this is a kid's movie. Ignore your logic. Forget it. It doesn't matter. But it kept bringing up. I kept thinking of all these things like the pay, the boyfriend, the guy needs a chiropractic adjustment, all these different things. But yeah, it's just unfortunate. And then this assumed knowledge of baseball versus like actual baseball knowledge kind of like confuses like when we're talking about the World Series stuff and how they just completely skipped the playoff portion of it, that kind of thing. And whether or not he was balking is basically doing the motion of a pitch but not going through the pitch, and you're trying to trick the runner, And after I don't know how long ago they made that rule, but they made it illegal, and all these different fake motions like you're trying to do that the kid tried to do, totally illegal now because it's just it's like you're dragging the game out. B, you're just like it shows you got no talent, and you're just kind of like doing like street ball, like street stick ball kind of shit. So that's where I was like, okay, this is kind of ridiculous. But him doing that changeup was actually good. I was like, okay, he can do a changeup. And then the underhanded pitch was pretty cool. I gotta admit, because I've actually seen.
They actually set it up pretty well too. They had the mom do the underhanded thing twice.
Yeah, and then I forget, was it El Duque that threw like 49 miles an hour on record one time and he struck a guy out? Do you remember what I'm talking about?
I mean, Bill Lee used to do that too, and when he was with the Red Sox, he would always throw the junk pitch. And the one time he got caught, boy, did it go far! But he definitely has gotten away with it because you don't expect a pitch that slow. So it's
weird. Work. So I think that's why I was like, maybe they could have just eliminated the fastball aspect and just made him this incredible change-up off-speed pitcher. But I don't know. I guess that doesn't work. Everyone loves a fastball.
The most unbelievable part is that the Cubs would win the World Series without Chet and Henry. Like, I just don't. How do they do it? We don't see any other pitchers.
That was the other thing too. Like, okay, so I thought you have to be on the playoff roster to get a ring, right? It's not just the regular season because of the September.
I mean, they could vote you to. They could vote you to get a ring. They can get you a ring.
Okay, so
you
that's
don't have to be on the playoff roster. I think.
Okay, I was just trying to make sure.
Given the circumstances, they would give him a ring.
Right.
Especially since financial fraud may have been committed against. So.
Yeah, the financial fraud. Yeah. So Chet Rocket Stedman, played by Gary Busey. I just want to put this on note. He's inspired by Roger Clemens, right? So in the movie, like, he's already like fatigued in his career. He's not throwing the gas as much as he used to.
There is no way that this man would be allowed to throw with his shoulder in that condition. I just
unless he gets the blades, which brings me to Roger Clemens. He was pitching 11 more seasons after this. So. And
this is around the time he went on steroids. Like, this is it. This is around that time.
Thinking, like, maybe they just should have inserted that. It's a storyline because that would explain why they would win the World Series if fucking this back. Because, yeah.
I do like the music. I like the music cue when his shoulder goes. That's I mean, it's not subtle at all, but it definitely sells it very well.
Yeah, and look, I'm telling you, that kid just needed a fucking pop, and he would have been totally normal again. Because that was clearly like a shoulder.
But my response to that is, why would you do it? Why would you mess with that success?
Well, at the time he didn't know it was going to lead him to success. But I'm saying, like, under normal circumstances, that's an unhealthy like thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's totally like.
I mean, it probably is. I mean, it's a hitch, and it's in the hitch, and he'll giddy up. But I mean, again, the movie is kind of ridiculous. So you either have to go with it or you.
I would have liked it better if they put a time limit saying, like, it's going to get back to normal. We just don't know when it's going to get back to normal. So then there's like this ticking clock in the background of when it's going to happen. And then it happens instead of just randomly.
See, but I actually think that takes away the effectiveness of his decision. Like, when he is able to still pitch, he makes the decision that he's going to retire. And I think that's really important for him to not know that he's going to lose it when he makes that decision.
I forgot about
that. I think you lose a lot. You lose the ethos of that moment if you have him on a ticking clock.
I get that. That makes sense.
Because then he knows that he could lose it at some point.
Yeah, I get that. Okay,
but him not knowing makes that scene all the more effective because he realizes, like, oh, I want to be a kid and not just play professional baseball.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess that kind of wraps up our discussion. My rating is a 5 out of 10. Your rating is a 7, you said?
I'm a 7 out of 10. I mean, again, I have a lot of nostalgia for this movie, and I think it is. I don't know. I think I like this more than a lot of those other family movies that came out around the same time. I think I like this more than Angels in the Outfield, honestly.
Ooh, we'll find out in like 2 months when we talk about that one, because I think the better performance is Joseph Gordon-Levitt in that one, because I've always found that performance kind of like very nostalgic and like heartwarming, because he's doing it for his dad.
I think that performance is better because I think he's a kid trying to be a kid. I think Thomas Ian Nicholas actually has the harder thing to do. Thomas Ian Nicholas actually has to play, and he is mostly interacting with adults on a different level, if that makes sense. Like he's interacting with them as a peer, whereas Joseph Gordon-Levitt is acting with them as a kid. And I think those are two very different challenges. I think Thomas Ian Nicholas has a higher degree of difficulty than Joseph Gordon-Levitt. I think Joseph Gordon-Levitt does a great job, but I don't think that. I think it's just different. It's like I think it's kind of comparing apples to oranges. But do you want I promised a Thomas Ian Nicholas hot take. Are you ready for it?
Ready for it.
He should have been the lead in American Pie, not Jason Biggs.
I could see that. Yeah, because he's more appealing, likable.
I think he's a much better actor.
That's true too.
I am not a big Jason Biggs guy. Never, even when I first saw it, I was like,
I think Sandy Silverman has kind of become like a cult classic because I'm not a big fan of the movie, but I like Neil Diamond, and that kind of brought Neil Diamond into like the modern era. Does that make sense? No one really heard of Neil Diamond until that comedy bit in the movie.
The only Jason Biggs performance I like is Jane Silent Bob Strike Back. And it's because he's literally the butt end.
Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, I agree.
And Jason Biggs is just making fun of him relentlessly, and it's pretty funny. But yeah, I like this movie probably way more than you did, which is surprising to me because usually it's the other way around. But it's nice to be on the other side for once.
Yeah, it's just, I couldn't get past the script, and like I was trying to get past it, but I just couldn't get past some of these holes. And the other thing I didn't like too is like in Major League, right? They tell us like, okay, we got 2 months left of the season and we have like 60 something wins and we need to win the division. We don't even know the record. We're just told that the Cubs are like on the brink of collapse and that their franchise is going to go away if we don't sell out every single game for the next 2 months.
The difference is that the Major League is about that team. Rookie of the Year is about a kid. I think that's the difference.
I get that. It's just, and I wanted some context.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is a movie that has to gloss over some things. Otherwise, it's going to get very bogged down. I think that was probably their biggest concern because the movie is much more about the emotion of the kid among anything else.
For sure. And I kind of wanted to wrap up this conversation with a little modern baseball talk for a few minutes. I know some things have been happening the last couple months.
I want to talk about the White Sox, that's for sure.
That's what I was going to say. The record of 100 losses in a season.
And 101 are the White Sox as we are recording this.
With 33 days left. No, 37 days left of the season or something.
Them going to 120 is absolutely happening. It's not a question in my mind. It's just a matter of are they going to hit 130?
Oh my goodness.
That's the question. Yeah. Are they going to get to 130?
So that's White Sox talk, and now Dodger talk, where Shohei Ohtani's finally stepped it up and hitting with guys on base. He had an amazing grand slam for when he hit 40 for 40 that night. That was like a couple days ago from this recording, but right now the Dodgers are looking good. They're starting to heat up at the right time. All the injuries are starting to come back.
There's no reason they can't win a series.
So I'm just worried that the way that the wild card playoff is looking right now, it's like Arizona and San Diego are just kind of stuck together, and the Braves are sitting at 6. So now I'm kind of worried that like if the Dodgers land at 2, we're going to end up in that situation again where it's going to be a division rival in the NLDS, and the last 2 years have been just fucking awful with that. So I'm just worried, and it's both the teams that have defeated us in the last 2 years. So I'm hoping I don't know if I want them to like get to 1 and then avoid them altogether until the NLCS, which might be worse, but I don't know. It's just maybe we just need to go through the NLDS.
I do not like how the wild card is. I was fine with it when it was one team. I don't like the way the postseason is now in baseball. I just think.
Don't believe me, I don't like it either.
And it's not because I'm rooting for any particular team. I mean, my team is way out of it, but I'm not a fan of the 12 teams and the buys, and I just think it's very flawed.
Yeah, me too. It's just the last couple of years, I went to Vegas the last couple of years on like opening playoff day because you got so many games to play with and parlays to put together. But I don't know. It just seems like it's very much now like NCAA college basketball where it's like the hottest team, whether you're a 15 seed or an 8 seed, if you're hot and your team's going, just that's how it is. And that's how the Rangers won last year. And the Rangers are 9 games under, or more than 9 games, like 19 games under 500 right now. So it's like, okay, They obviously had a one and done. Maybe they're going to be the odd years for Boshi on this one, but because Boshi's been winning in the even years, and now with the Rangers, it's the first
Yeah,
odd year. So
it's pretty funny.
who knows? But this playoff system is it's scary because it's making me worried, and the rest time and all that kind of thing. And I also wanted to mention that the pitcher Chet Rocket Steadman from the movie very much reminds me of Clayton Kershaw, and that scares the shit out of me because Kershaw I don't even think should be starting at his I don't know. And then I'm Walker
Yeah,
Buehler.
this is probably it. This is probably it for him.
Yeah, and then Walker Buehler. Oh my God, what a prospect he was, and then it just all went to shit with his surgery. That sucks for them.
Yeah,
But
you said 2 Tommy Johns, right?
I think so, yeah. And then Bobby Miller.
Good.
Seemed like a good prospect last year, and now he just can't seem to not give up 4 runs a game. So it sucks, but we're gonna have to rely on starters more, and I don't know. It's gonna be crazy in the playoffs. So that's kind of my take for this month. And we still
It's
got
really hard for me to stay engaged with baseball when the White Sox are so terrible. I mean, look, the Bears have hopes. So I'm like really excited for football, which I kind of always am excited for football to an extent, but I have all the more reason to be this year because again, the White Sox are so historically bad.
as long as Puka Nacua on the Rams does well this year, that's all I care about. Because I don't expect the Rams to win a title in the next couple of years, but they'll get to that level. But I think Puka Nacua is a wide receiver that can get them to the level. So we'll see if he's the offensive player of the year, because right now I checked his Vegas odds. It's like plus 700. That's a great bet. So I'm just saying. But yeah, that's kind of where we're wrapping up for the month of August. Next month will be the 7th inning, and it's going to be Major League 2. And we're going to talk about how 1994 had the most baseball movies ever released, and yet it was the year that had the strike. So that was like a sign of things to come.
Incredible Ken Burns documentary, which we will have more about soon. But yeah,
part of the baseball month of October, because October is going to have the 8th and 9th inning combined into one double feature. We're going to talk about Angels in the Outfield and Moneyball, as well as going over that Ken Burns documentary. So it's all about baseball in October. Less horror, more baseball. And we'll see how the playoffs go, and we'll kind of cover the playoffs as we go, I guess, for October. So
yep. But next week we are doing something very special. We are celebrating a double 30th anniversary. We are going over another 1994 movie, a little bit more unconventional, Naked Gun 33 in the third, and we are pairing it with the right match. It is the 30th anniversary of the opening of the United Center and the 30th anniversary of SummerSlam, the first event ever held in the United Center. So we will be talking about a match that I know Brian is so excited to talk about, The Undertaker versus The Undertaker.
Well, I think I wanted to watch the whole show, or would you go Undertaker versus Undertaker? Because I've already watched the show a bunch of times already as a kid, but I can
we're going to talk about the whole show. We're going to talk about the whole show.
Okay, because I've been ready and preparing for it, and I can't believe that Mabel had a good match with Jeff Jarrett all these years later. So that's always one of my takeaways from that show.
It's the best blue bar cage match in history, Brett Nolan. Maybe one of the best cage matches ever. Honestly, really good. Razor Ramon and Diesel. We've got the non-tag title match. We've got Lex Luger as a potential traitor, which I know is very exciting. And yeah, but a lot of Brett Nolan talk, because it's got this might be Brett's best babyface promo. I know he gets a lot of credit for great heel promos. This show might have his best babyface promo.
Owen, I was the guy that protected you as a kid, Owen. Yeah, I know the whole Bret Hart shtick with Owen, especially the promo 97. But I just want to mention one thing: Naked Gun 33 in the third. It's nearly as good as the second one and the first one, obviously. But man, Fred Ward is fun. And that's look, it's a bad script, but Fred Ward is doing his best, and Leslie Nielsen finds himself in a sperm making that movie. So a lot to talk about, but it also connects to OJ and how OJ was probably bigger than most wrestlers in 1995, which explains the wrestling business in 95.
Somehow Naked Gun 33 in the third connects to OJ, of course, and Leslie Nielsen appears with George Kennedy at SummerSlam.
Oh yeah, and let's talk about the case, and the case being closed, wink wink, and we'll talk about that visual, because that was fucking hilarious. But that kind of wraps up our discussion. Any final thoughts before we go?
Rookie of the Year is fun. Again, it is not a great movie, but it's super fun.
All right. My final thought is, if you have a hurt shoulder, go to a chiropractor. I'm sure they can pop that shit out for you. But other than that, thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you again soon.